used to be a high flyer. He was one of the youngest junior doctors to be made a consultant at St George's Hospital in London. Malcolm Pearce wanted to be the world's first ever surgeon to unravel the mystery of how to save the lives of ectopic embryos, a condition which is increasingly common. Pearce and his rivals started to try out a new and revolutionary idea. When a pregnancy is ectopic, it means the embryo has become attached to the wrong part of the woman's reproductive system, where it threatens the mother's life and cannot itself survive.
Good, there's gestation set there.
The new idea was to try and preserve the embryo in its gestational sac while reimplanting it through the cervix into its rightful place, the womb. It was to excite a contest between Pearce and his main competitor.
You could describe it as a race because Malcolm started his work soon after he'd heard me give a lecture on the subject, a theoretical argument as to why we should be thinking about these procedures. And thereafter, the issue was really who would succeed in achieving the first successful implantations.
Yeah, pick it up, please. Then just look me behind you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The implant operation was tried over and over again. Each time the embryo failed to survive. Then Pearce announced to the world that he'd succeeded. An embryo had survived to full term. A miracle 6-pound baby girl was born.
Our interest in the subject was greatly rejuvenated, and we set to with much more enthusiasm.
The excitement was short-lived. No one could find the mother and baby. None of the staff could remember working alongside Dr. Pearce at the time of the implant operation.
I had some telephone calls from colleagues who said they'd heard some rather unpleasant rumors about the particular case report. And having heard comments like that about original work before, I thought, well, time will tell.
An internal inquiry was set up and chaired by the hospital's principal, Sir William Asher. Pearce denied the charge of fraud, but St George's could find no evidence to substantiate his claims of a breakthrough.
Sir William Asher at George's, I think, has reacted extremely well with the speed of setting up this inquiry into the Pearce case and also the speed in which it reported. Now, I'm afraid that can't be said about the majority of cases I'm aware of in this country. Very rarely has there been an inquiry at all. The case has usually been brushed under the carpet, and people really haven't wanted to know.
When fraud is committed, the perpetrator exposes colleagues to a dilemma not of their making. In the absence of an independent investigating authority, they will harbour a secret they cannot share.
My supervisor had a lot of power in the situation. My initial experience was one of guilt and bewilderment as to how to proceed.
Thomas is a scientific investigator too frightened to reveal his identity. During a large study of psychiatric patients, he witnessed how his supervisor furthered his own career by deliberately distorting and manipulating crucial results. The study was designed to inform government about how mental patients should be treated while living in the community. As a professional evaluator, part of Thomas's job was to ensure the right patients were entered onto the study. He claims that easy-to-treat patients were deliberately introduced.
In our study, we had 2 patients who, in my view, were completely unsuitable, basically, because they didn't have a diagnosis of the particular mental disorder we were investigating.
In these studies, patients are divided into 2 groups. One group is given the new treatment and compared later to the other group. No one should be able to influence the outcome. Patients are assigned numbers in order to hide their identity. Then, using these numbers, the evaluator randomly assigns the patients. It's called randomization, and its key ingredient is secrecy.
My supervisor broke into my filing cabinet and removed the randomization envelopes, which had been entrusted to me. He had an investment in demonstrating that this particular therapy was effective. And in order to increase the likelihood of that, he wanted to select the patients with the best prognosis into the treatment group.
Once the study starts, patients must remain in the same treatment group to ensure accurate results.
My supervisor told me to drop a patient from the treatment group because they weren't doing very well, and to substitute another patient. He asked me to keep this a secret. I refused to have anything to do with this, and we had quite a row about it. And he later tried to fire me, saying that I was incompetent.
Randomized trials are usually rigorous and therefore trusted, so this study is unlikely to be repeated. In Britain, there are others who have witnessed serious acts of fraud. Their research projects are also unlikely to be repeated due to financial constraints.
My task was to investigate the possible toxic effects of the chemical, which workers at a plant had been exposed to. I produced the results which showed there were indeed some toxic effects. They used my figures as an independent scientist, and they distorted them for their own ends.
In my laboratory, I found results that were being systematically changed, and I was very concerned about this, and I couldn't get a clear reason why this was going on. I went to my superior, and subsequently I found that all sorts of investigations into my own work and performance began.
The drug was being used to alleviate symptoms of diseases which people with AIDS and other people may suffer. So it was very important that the effects of the drug were monitored. I went to the senior member of the department and said I was very concerned generally about the quality of the data. I was in an atmosphere of, well, don't you rock the boat, this has nothing to do with you, it's not your study. I was in a very, very difficult position.
In Britain, there is now a support organisation for those who have witnessed scientific and medical fraud. They're whistleblowers. As demand grows, more and more new groups are being set up.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Geoffrey Hunt. I'm the National Coordinator of Freedom to Care.
As though guilty of serious crimes, they must hold their meetings in secret.
Truth is durable, and it lasts, and it will come out eventually. It's just the price some people pay along the way. It's quite a high one.
I know many people who've lost their jobs and suffered greatly, having stood up for the rights of the patient and the rights of science.
All too often, the verdict on cases like these is decided by gossip, rumour and scandal. Bullish, brazen, bold America. This country is more than an ocean apart from Britain. Here, those who have witnessed fraud do have an official place to turn to. In the past decade, many scientists and doctors have been found guilty of fraud and misconduct.
the news this hour. An immunologist from upstate New York successfully hoaxed scientific leaders until it was discovered he used a plain, ordinary black marker pen to falsify skin
Good morning. In the news this morning, a report about a psychologist who lied in his research findings on the bad effects some drugs have on mental patients.
The man responsible is veteran Democrat Congressman John Dingell. $76 billion is spent on science and medicine every year. Dingell's powerful investigating committee was charged with protecting every cent of it, and that means vigorously rooting out fraud. His office in Congress proudly exhibits his hunting successes. His other conquests can be found among once prominent members of the scientific community.
He's a tough guy. Worked for him for 22 years. We've gotten involved in some, wild-ass investigations, and he's been politically courageous through them, and particularly in the science fraud area.
Rascality seems to be triumphing over virtue in many instances in a fashion that I find...
Scientists would be subpoenaed to appear before his tireless investigating committees, where they would often have to endure public humiliation.
And I don't want you to get the impression that this committee is going to stage a one-day hearing, bring you up, make you miserable, and then let you go on about your business. When we do these things, we try and see to it that the pain and suffering goes on for a greater period of time until the abuse that is obvious is taken care of.
Scientists tend to be a very influential, very sticky, prickly lot, and they tend to be highly resentful of the idea that anyone would have the arrogance to question them about their expenditures of public monies, or whether in fact a scientific research program was in fact carried out, or was carried out fairly and honorably and truthfully according to good scientific principles or according to good ethical principles. And so taking science on in connection with matters of that sort is a rather dangerous and fearsome experience.
Dingell's zealous tactics did eventually yield results and led to dozens of celebrated fraud investigations. But it didn't happen without a struggle.
The scientific community could have come out of their shell immediately and said that there's a real problem here, and we're going to correct it, and we're sorry this happened. But they refused to do that. And we had scientists come in and look at the notebooks once we subpoenaed them and say, hey, this is fabricated. This is not real data. We say, fine, would you testify? Oh, not me. It'd be an anathema within the scientific community. They'd never talk to me again. And these are very prominent scientists.
Last winter, the American voters sent the Democrats packing. John Dingell and his investigating team were among the casualties. The legendary interrogator was silenced.
Don't want to make your conduct the issue.
But conferences like this one are evidence of Dingell's legacy.
You will often find that will become the issue when you raise on appeal.
These scientists and doctors are being taught how to cope with fraud and misconduct if it ever happens in their workplace.
Somebody says, yes, I did it, but it was an honest mistake. I didn't realize that it was wrong. Why shouldn't the same argument in a civil case apply? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Why should community standards or anything else explain away the offense if indeed it was wrong and if the person admits he did it, number one. Secondly, how do we know that person's telling the truth and it was an honest mistake?
It's a really important issue because academic panels are particularly prone to saying, he said he didn't mean it, therefore he had no intent, therefore it's not. I mean, my favorite story like that actually involves plagiarism, where there's 27 paragraphs from one paper and another with no citation or attribution. And the panel's report, which I have read, reads like this. He told us he didn't mean to do it. Misconduct requires intent. Therefore, this is not plagiarism. Now, this is an offense for which a student would have been expelled, because our student codes of conduct are unequivocal. Plagiarism is citation without attribution. It's very straightforward.
Scientists acknowledge the need to preserve the confidence of the public.
We accept a great deal of public funds, and we owe it to the public to not only have good science that's exciting, that moves people forward, that helps our country, but that's honest. It's their money in a large sense. The American people have been very generous to the scientific community, and they deserve honesty.
From what I've seen and from what others have told